One thing about Stratford that's always fascinated me is the number of fires that they had. There were 4 fires altogether, 1594 and 1595, 1614 and 1641. And there were all sorts of stories about these fires, how terrible they were. And I thought I would like to try and sponsor a project which would examine the fires in more detail. The project is funded by Historic England. They come up with a generous grant, and the Stratford Society have decided to sponsor the project. And that, because we've got this funding, we're able to engage, first of all, 2 building archaeologists who visit the timber frame properties that are surviving, and they estimate whether it's worth making further investigation. And they draw plans and take photographs and so on. And then we have, we're also able to engage a dendrochronologist who takes samples from likely looking timbers, and counts the tree rings that are on the samples he takes. And then they can match them against a database that they have, and can give a date that the tree was felled that was used for the building work, and which enables you to date the building. I mean, I have to admit that sometimes they can only reach an approximate date. They can't tell you the exact date that the tree was felled, but they can give you a range of dates within which the building can be dated. I'm in charge of the documentary work, and what we do is to go through the archives, surviving archives, and try and work out exactly which buildings were damaged, and to plot that on a map, so we can work out who was bearing the cost of the rebuilding of these houses, and also the effect on the economic life of the town. We don't know what caused them, actually. The moralists of the day blamed it on to not observing the Sabbath, because the 1594 and 1595 fires allegedly broke out on the same day of the year, exactly 12 months apart. But in fact, I think it was more like strong winds, because most of the damage was caused by blazing thatch, which was carried from one house to another, and obviously caused more extensive damage. They sent people to all parts of the country to collect money. Yeah, and this is quite normal. The vicar was required to read it out in the parish church, and then people would subscribe to it. Most of the buildings that were destroyed were probably a medieval in origin and quite sort of simple in layout and plan, but they were replaced by buildings which we'll see, which are at least 3 stories and topped with gables and so on. So it did transform the townscape, and people who were living here at the time would have been aware of that, including Shakespeare, of course, because he owned property in the town, in Henry Street and in Chapel Street. And one of the fires, the 1614 fire, affected the barns at the bottom of Chapel Lane and gradually crept up to the Great Garden. So he would have been, concerned about whether his house itself would be damaged. Fire precautions were rudimentary. Each of the aldermen and capital burgesses were supposed to have a bucket outside their house that they could use to extinguish the flames. And after the 3 fires, there was increasing pressure on the tenants of their buildings to that they should rebuild in brick and thatch, or they should put slate on instead of thatch.
Was there anything like a borough fire brigade, or were there designated people to deal with this?
Not at that time. That came along in the 18th century, and it was very much the responsibility of the people who lived in the town to make sure there wasn't an outbreak of fire. The rebuilding material we hope is going to be oak, because dendrochronology doesn't work with other timbers, particularly elm or ash. So we hope it's going to be oak, and it usually is. The oak from the Forest of Arden would be a natural and quite local source. Yeah, 21 Chapel Street was entirely elm, so we haven't been able to date that.
But you can do isotopic dating, but that's far more expensive.
Yes, I mean we're currently drawing up a list of sort of failures in quotes, which have not been of oak, or we haven't been able to date the samples, and we're going to ask Historic England whether they are willing to fund the isotope approach. Yeah, we don't actually know quite where the fire started, but I can show you some of the buildings that we've been investigating to try and get an answer to that.